What is up, everybody? Welcome back into the Two Stripes Podcast, the podcast that covers the whole college football landscape. My name is Colton Denning, and I am your host. Want to welcome everybody into the show today. Make sure to go to soundcloud.com/twostripespod or go to Apple Podcasts and search the Two Stripes Podcast to find all of the old Two Stripes Podcast episodes. You can also subscribe on that Apple Podcast feed and leave a review. Leave me some feedback as to what I can do to make this show better. We are closing in on college football. It is just right around the corner. A lot of teams are starting fall practice next week. And just as I'm recording this, Hugh Freeze has stepped down at Ole Miss. So welcome back, college football, you beautiful son of a bitch. Getting into today's episode, though, I was on vacation last weekend in Orlando, and I took some time out to visit the campus of the team that we're going to talk about today, the University of Central Florida. It was my first time ever being on campus at UCF. And as I talk about with our guest today, I was pretty surprised at how big UCF is. There's a lot going on that campus, and it definitely does not have the feel of a group of five school. And I know that there are other schools out there that are big and don't play Division I football, but UCF just feels like a major college campus and feels like it should be the home to major athletics. And as I talk about today with Ryan Bass, UCF is on the path to that, and specifically the football team. In 2015, UCF went winless in George O'Leary's last year there and hired Scott Frost last offseason, and it was his first head coaching job, and he managed to guide the Knights to 6 wins last year and a bowl game. It was a huge turnaround. They had one of the better defenses in the country, and although he came in with an offensive pedigree and they struggled, you can really start to see the pieces heading into this year and beyond being built up for UCF to be a major player, not only in the AAC, but as a program that could be attractive for Power 5 conferences in the future, namely the Big 12. So to discuss UCF and everything going on with their program, I sat down and talked with Ryan Bass, the sports director over at CBS Tampa and a UCF alum himself, about the program, its future, and how Scott Frost is building something pretty special in Orlando right now. With that in mind, let's get into today's episode. And joining me now to talk all things UCF Golden Knights football is Ryan Bass, and he is the sports director at CBS Tampa and 10 News WTSP. Ryan, how you doing today, my friend? Thank you for joining the show.
Of course, Colton. Look, I just got a bone to pick with you right off the start here. We dropped the Golden in 2007, so it's the UCF Knights, by the way. You'll a lot of UCF fans are still sensitive about that Golden put in front of the team. So, but hopefully in 2017, it's a Golden season.
I will rightfully eat my crow on that, and it's crazy that I got that wrong because I was actually in Orlando just last week and visited campus for the first time and went to the bookstore, checked out the stadium, and I was pretty in awe at how big that campus actually is and how much of that part of the city revolves around UCF. And UCF kind of feels like it has the infrastructure to be in place at some point in the future to be a Power 5 program. Do you think that's right? And what do you think about their future in trying to reach those heights?
Yeah, Colton, I think you kind of got the firsthand experience of what everybody's starting to find out now across college football is UCF has top-notch facilities, and that's only going to continue to grow under athletic director Danny White. I mean, he has big plans for what this campus, is going to look like in the future. I mean, there's talk of a lazy river coming outside of the stadium for student athletes. So, when you look at UCF's facilities, the on-campus stadium, the indoor practice facility, they were the first of any program in the state of Florida to build an indoor practice facility. And you think that's a no-brainer, right? With how much it rains in Florida, how
Absolutely.
hot it is in the summer. UCF was the first of any school, Power 5 or not, in Florida to have that. So, they've been ahead of the curve here for a number of years. When I started at UCF in 2007, that was the first year they had their on-campus stadium, first year that they opened their new basketball arena. Ever since then, it's been constant growth. They say UCF stands for under construction forever, and that's absolutely true. because the growth and the work to be done on campus never really stops. And I think that's what has a lot of Power 5 conferences eyeing UCF as a potential add, specifically the Big 12, because they are up and coming as far as their facilities are concerned, and they're up and coming as far as their product is on the field and on the basketball court and on the baseball diamond. UCF is a growing university. It is the largest university in the country. They continue to add, to that total. Their athletics continue to improve each and every year. They're putting players in the pros in each and every sport. So the term that's kind of been associated with UCF for years has been sleeping giant. I think that giant has already woken up, Colton, and I think as UCF continues to grow, their brand will only continue to further among college football and beyond.
I got to say, the only thing I was disappointed about, I saw the statue of the knight riding the horse out in front, and then there was the statue of George O'Leary. Where's the Dante Culpepper statue?
I think because Dante was kind of in the, in the birth years of UCF football, he doesn't necessarily get the love that he deserves. I'm telling you what, Dante and Blake Bortles, I think both of them, and maybe even Brandon Marshall deserve their own statues. But yes, those are really the gods among UCF football when you're talking about those guys. George O'Leary, though, rightfully so, deserves a statue as well. He's really the one that put this program on the map and helped bring it to the heights that they are today.
So you were talking about how UCF made a commitment to facilities, having the first indoor facility of any state of Florida program, and I was reading through the Athlon magazine previews earlier last month just to kind of get a sense of some of these Group of 5 teams. And in the USF section, an anonymous coach alluded to USF's ability to recruit, but needing to step up to UCF's administration's level of commitment. Is there anything to that? And do you think that has kind of what separates them from a school like USF is that the commitment, like you said, to even something like building a lazy river or just those athletic facilities is what sets them apart and what's going to enable them to have maybe a future in a Power 5 conference?
I think both schools had their advantages. I mean, USF has been playing football and had been ranked number 2 in the country. UCF's had their program around longer than USF, but, the Bulls have been very successful as well, in their time under, Jim Leavitt. He was the one that really put that program on the map and helped them kind of rise through the ranks of college football. They joined the Big East Conference, prior to UCF ever, joining whatever, if you want to call it a Power 6 conference, if you will. USF wasn't really able to do much, in the Big East when it was around. But, I think both programs kind of go hand in hand here, Colton. They are natural rivals. Both fan bases despise each other. Both coaches, will take shots at each other. The players, have this hatred towards one another. And that's what makes, the rivalry great between the two schools. UCF, I think they're more advanced as far as, the facilities are concerned. But the bigger marketplace is Tampa. I mean, Tampa, has a bigger breeding ground for at least USF alums being in this area. So, I think UCF is ahead as far as facilities are concerned in that standpoint. I mean, the on-campus stadium clearly puts a divide between the two schools as far as the playing field. I just think, USF is very far behind right now because they don't have that on-campus stadium. They're not bringing in the type of revenue. I mean, UCF in 2015-16 brought in 12 million more than USF as far as their athletic revenue is concerned. And a lot of that has to do with the on-campus stadium. I mean, USF doesn't really get a big chunk of the pie. That's all going to the Buccaneers and the Tampa Bay or in the Glazers who own the Buccaneers. So, UCF is able to get a much larger chunk of the pie by having their own on-campus stadium, and that's what I think clearly sets the two apart. But once USF gets that, I mean, the playing field will then be leveled, on and off the field, if you will.
You look around at the state of Florida, and of course there's always the big three in FSU, Miami, and Florida, and now UCF has all their excitement with Scott Frost going from 0 wins to 6 wins in a bowl game last season. You have USF, and they might be the best non-Power 5 team in the country this season. And then you even have schools like FIU, who hired Butch Davis, who has a reputation in the state of Florida, and FAU, who hired Lane Kiffin, who no matter what is always going to bring attention to wherever he is. And you would figure that program, especially with Kendall Briles as offensive coordinator, is going to at least be in the headlines more so than it has been in the past. What's it like being in the state of Florida right now as a college football fan, and particularly to have UCF on the come up right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. Mark Richt is another one who's really making some waves right now down at the University of Miami. I mean, what he's been able to do in such a short amount of time with that program since being hired is amazing. I mean, the buzz around is spectacular, and he's really put a charge in UM's recruiting, a type of excitement that we haven't seen, in many, many years down there in Coral Gables. But yeah, FAU certainly exciting with Lane Kiffin there. Look, I think that's, just a stopping, a stop in the road for Lane Kiffin. I don't think he's there long term. Butch Davis is towards the end of his career. I think, a couple of years at FIU maybe. Those guys aren't necessarily, to me, coaches that are building blocks. Charlie Strong and Scott Frost, I think they are. Frost, the rumors have already started after, winning 6 games in his first season that Nebraska could be on his tails. And I think eventually if Mike Riley does get fired, he will go there. But, I think those two coaches, they're premier coaches, in the state of Florida outside of the Power 5 schools. Frost, young, up and coming, an offensive genius, if you will, a great coaching staff around him. And Charlie Strong has already proved, that he can win in the state of Florida, whether it be on the recruiting trail or also, on the football field, getting a majority of the players from Florida to come up and compete and win a Big East title in a New Year's Six bowl game with Louisville. So, I think that those two coaches are the two that you really look at outside the Power 5 guys that are the cream of the crop in the state of Florida. But yeah, you mentioned it, Colton. I mean, it's exciting. It is exciting football, at the college ranks right now in the state of Florida, and it's going to be fun to watch. Even the lower tier programs of FIU and FAU, they're going to be must-see TV with the big-name coaches that they were able to bring.
What stands out about the way Scott Frost runs UCF?
He's so laid back, man. I mean, he is certainly a player's coach, but he's hard on these guys, man. He's somebody that's going to hold these guys accountable if they're not getting it right. I remember in practice, a couple of months ago, I believe over the spring, his quarterback, Mackenzie Milton, just wasn't getting his play right. And so Frost stopped the offense, said, screw it, give me the helmet, strapped the helmet on, and went back there and performed the play, perfected it. And it was awesome. You don't see a coach say, move aside. He strapped the helmet on, got under center, and said, guys, let's go full speed here. That's the kind of guy he is, man. He is a perfectionist. He demands the best out of his players. Every single guy raves about the kind of coach that he is, how relatable he is to the guys. Just look at, for just a small anecdote here of Frost's genius. Shaquem Griffin, who won the, Defensive Player of the Year last year in the American Conference. This was somebody who, wasn't getting a lot of playing time prior to, the Scott Frost era here at UCF. A lot of people thought, especially around the program, that, he was just an addition to his brother Shaquille, who was a starter for George O'Leary and UCF. And they converted Shaquem from the safety position to linebacker, added some weight to him, and look what happened. I mean, he was a force off the edge, was one of the top sack artists in the nation, led the American Conference in sacks. And I think that's just a small anecdote of what Frost was able to get out of a guy who previously, hadn't had much of a resume here at UCF. So he is very likable. He's smart. He's energetic. He's enthusiastic. His coaches love him. Recruits love him. And if he's here long term, man, watch out, because he's that spark UCF needs to take this school to the next level and potentially join a Power 5 conference.
Getting into his ability to recruit, Frost, of course, played quarterback at Nebraska, and in the NFL played both on the offensive side of the ball and defensive side of the ball. And then when he went into coaching, he actually started out on the defensive side of the ball before shifting into an offensive role with Oregon and then becoming their offensive coordinator before taking the UCF job. Do you think that experience on both sides of the ball, as well as what you're saying, his ability to relate to recruits and to have that personality, is what makes him such a good recruiter? Because you look at their class last year, and they pulled in the top Group of 5 class, which ranked 54th in the 24/7 Sports Composite.
Yeah, I think that's partly it. I mean, a guy that's played on both sides of the ball, helps as well. His success that he had at Nebraska when he was there, how great of a quarterback he was. I just think he walks into a room, and I've had a chance to sit side by side with him. I had a chance to host for a couple of events prior to last UCF football season, and he's just got this bravado and this confidence that comes off that's so likable. He's so witty and funny and quick on his feet, which kind of is ironic because he's that exact same way as an offensive coordinator on the field. How quickly he adjusts to what the defense is doing. So yeah, I just think he has the perfect personality. And it's funny because when UCF was kind of coveting new head coaches after, George O'Leary stepped down, back in December 2015, when he was hired, he kind of came out of the blue. I mean, everybody had kind of pegged Dino Babers as the guy, from Bowling Green, who eventually took over at Syracuse, pegged him as kind of be the guy. And he was this, very, very loud, outlandish, type of, loud personality. And Frost isn't really like that. He's more reserved. But when you kind of get him, away from these big crowds, he's fantastic. And that kind of personality, I think, is perfect for UCF. And he's been a perfect fit. You saw what his second recruiting class was able to do here at UCF. And I'm telling you, he's going to be, top 40 range this year. With the type of talent he's able to pull in, especially now with an early signing class and recruits able to sign early in a cycle. A lot of these guys aren't going to get plucked away from UCF. So watch out, man. Scott Frost, great on the recruiting trail and really making a name for himself as a young head coach as well.
Moving to UCF on the field in 2017, they were so young on offense last year. You mentioned Mackenzie Milton. He was a freshman quarterback. There was a freshman running back, a lot of really young receivers and young offensive linemen. And they struggled last season. And what do you think, or what was the big talk in spring ball about this offense? And is a lot of the improvement that you would expect them to have just being more comfortable in year two of that system?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it, Colton. I mean, look, it's a very complex offensive system that Scott Frost was implementing with a true freshman quarterback that took over in Mackenzie Milton. There's going to be hiccups. You saw some bright spots. I mean, Adrian Killings, who came in here as a freshman, had an 80-plus yard catch and run against Michigan. You saw the offense start to get a little fluidity when Mackenzie Milton was healthy and in the lineup. Juwan Hamilton, looked pretty good. Another true freshman that played last year at the running back position. So, I think it's kind of those, you're working out those kinks, right? I mean, nobody really expected the defense to be great last year, and they were one of the best in the nation under Eric Chinander. Everybody thought the offense was going to come together quickly. That didn't quite happen. I think this year the offense is going to outshine the defense for Scott Frost. And I think that's just it. Look, a lot of the success will hinge on Mackenzie Milton's growth. In 2017, I've been told that he put on about, 20, 25 pounds in the offseason, try to become a little more durable on his feet. He got hit a lot last year. The offensive line was banged up. They're healthy heading into 2017. So as long as that O-line stays healthy and is able to block from Milton, I think you're going to see a much, much improved offense in 2017, and especially because they've got a lot of playmakers. I mean, they're stacked at running back. Their group at receivers is one of the best they've had in years. One of the deepest groups they've had in years, led by Traquan Smith, who last year came up just shy of 1,000 yards. I think he's in for a 1,000-yard season this year. Their tight end group, led by Jordan Akins and Jordan Franks, they just got weapons all over the field, man. And that's what I think makes them so darn dangerous, that if Milton gets it all together and is able to get the ball to these weapons, UCF's offense is going to be really, really tough to stop in 2017.
You just talked about the playmakers out wide and at running back. Do you expect them to be the strength of the offense this year?
I think the running back group is going to be the strength of the offense this year. I mean, you just look at the depth that they've accumulated there at that position. Let's start with Juwan Hamilton, who's expected to be the starter heading into 2017. Had a great year last year. Somebody that's also put on some weight. In the weight room, has become a little bit more durable, is somebody that I think this offense is going to rely on, especially if the offensive line is healthy. I think they're going to try to take the ball as much as they can, out of Mackenzie Milton's hand and put it in Juwan Hamilton's to try and make plays. You saw some glimpses of that, last year with what he was able to accomplish. You look at some of the other names, Taj McGowan, C.J. Jones. I mentioned Killings. He's more of that slot guy, wide receiver, running back. They brought in a freshman, their highest rated recruit this year, who was kind of a late add to the signing class, in Cordarian Richardson, a running back out of Memphis. Everybody is raving about this kid, man. I just think you're going to see him, bust out onto the field and get some real playing time here as a freshman, once he's able to kind of get the playbook under him. This, to me, is the deepest position group they have. If they can rely on running the football, it's going to make it that much easier for McKenzie Milton. The only questions here are, can Juwan really carry the load? How many carries will he get? And Richardson, I mean, if he can step up and be good, boy, it's going to be a scary position group to watch out for, especially on the ground for UCF in 2017.
UCF really excelled defensively last season. They end up 30th in defensive S&P plus, and they were one of the most aggressive defenses in the country, especially in the front seven. And they bring back a lot of those pieces, including linebacker Shaquem Griffin. Do you expect that aggression to continue and be sort of what defines their defense again this year?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I think they're very talented on the defensive side of the ball. There's a lot of question marks, of course, in that secondary. You're losing every single secondary starter, so there's going to be a lot of youth back there, with that secondary. But you look at some of the guys that I think can have a real big impact this year. Jemias Pittman, who's their star defensive tackle, I think he's gonna take even more steps towards stardom this year. He's somebody that this defensive line is really going to rely on. Tristan Hill was again a late add, somebody that came over from Virginia that this coaching staff recruited really hard, looked at him as potentially being a starter when they were recruiting him during his cycle. He comes over and makes an instant impact in his freshman season. I think Kyle Gibson needs to take a step up. This is a 4-star recruit out of Tampa Armwood that we really haven't seen that potential really shine on the football field as much as maybe we would have expected. Shaquan Burkett was somebody that had left the football team for personal reasons, headed back to Georgia. He had a child, so he is back. He's been reinstated. Asked Scott Frost if he could rejoin the football team. That's a huge add, for that defense. Somebody with experience that can come in and start right away. They've got some young talent, but the issue here is, what is that secondary going to look like? Because there's a lot of new faces there that they're going to have to step up in the absence of like a Shaquille Griffin, who's probably going to start for the Seattle Seahawks this year, as a rookie in the NFL. TJ McCutcherson, who's now, off in the NFL as well. So there's a lot of question marks of how this defensive backfield is going to respond. Neville Clark, somebody who's suspended for the first couple games of the year, he's very talented. Byron Brown, another talented guy. Brandon Moore, a young guy as well. So Richie Grant's another name who's been thrown out there. Sean Burgess-Becker, a transfer from Alabama, is somebody that I know they're going to rely on in that defensive backfield. So, yeah, there's a lot of question marks there on defense, but the strength, no doubt, is rushing the quarterback, that defensive line, and, of course, Shaquem Griffin, the reigning defensive player of the year.
Do you think they'll maybe ease up in that front seven, at least early on, as they kind of figure out what they have in the secondary?
What do you mean by ease up?
Not be as aggressive as they were last year, as just they kind of rotate in those new guys in the secondary, or is it just going to be all go and kind of throw those guys in the secondary into the fire?
I mean, I think they're going to throw those guys in the fire. I mean, the best way to avoid that secondary getting picked on is getting to the quarterback. And I think they're going to try to do that, as well as any team, in the conference for sure. And they have the talent to do that. They got the beef up front, to get to the quarterback. So, if I'm UCF, I try as hard as I can to put pressure on opposing quarterbacks in this conference, because guys like Quentin Flowers are going to eat you apart with that young, inexperienced secondary you got back there. So, yeah, expect to see a lot of blitzing, a lot of stunts on that defensive line, a lot of opportunity for UCF to try to get Shaquem Griffin free and roaming around to try to keep that quarterback in the pocket. So, I think pressure is going to be on for sure on opposing offenses this year.
For the people who don't know linebacker Shaquem Griffin's story, he had his left hand amputated as a 4-year-old due to a congenital disorder. And like you said, he ends up winning AAC Defensive Player of the Year last year, had 11 sacks, had 20 total tackles for loss, an interception, and 7 passes broken up. How does this guy do it?
I mean, true grit, determination, heart, and passion for the game. I mean, he is one of the more inspirational stories you'll find in any sport. And, I've had the opportunity to get to know Shaquem for a very long time. I was working, down here at Tampa, my previous employer, Bright House Sports Network, back in, 2012 to 2015. And that was when Shaquem and his brother Shaquille were still in high school. They were at Lakewood High School here in St. Petersburg. So I got an opportunity to really get to know both of them. And they're such phenomenal young men. You knew and you had this sense when you talked to them that they were going to make it, and just the bond together. And that's the thing a lot of people are questioning here is that this is the first time that Shaquem is going to be away from his brother. They're the same age, but Shaquem redshirted and Shaquille didn't. So, how's that adjustment going to be? But, Shaquem's really, really matured over the last couple of years, and I think last year's success really helped mold him into the kind of man and player that he's going to be. He's got aspirations to join his brother in the NFL. And I think had he left early and come out, he would have potentially been drafted this year. But I think if he can repeat, and one of my bold predictions for this year is that he's not only going to repeat his numbers, he's going to best those numbers. He's going to improve on his sack total from last year. I know there's going to be a target on his back, but there's nothing this guy can't do. He's only getting better. He's gaining more weight. He's watching more film. He is one of the greatest guys in college football, an inspirational story, and somebody that I'm so proud of to know and to call a friend. And, happy to see his success, and it's only going to continue to get better here moving forward.
He is certainly one of the better college football players to root for with his story. So if you haven't checked out Shaquem Griffin, be sure to do so because, like Ryan is saying, it is very inspirational.
He's
story.
awesome. He's awesome.
Moving into the 2017 schedule and looking at that non-conference, the two names that stick out for them are games against Georgia Tech at home and at Maryland. Both of those teams, I'd say Georgia Tech may be more dangerous in their own right, especially with the offense they run. But I wouldn't say that either of those games are unwinnable by any means. Do you expect UCF to coming out of that slate 1-1, and what do you think the odds are that they're able to steal one of those games?
Look, I truly think the schedule is a little tough for UCF out of conference. I mean, I'm not talking about Maine here, the Black Bears, but I think both of those games are tough. It's good to have Georgia Tech at home for UCF. That's a night game as well. They play well, at Spectrum Stadium at night. Those two games are going to be tough. Really, the biggest tests early on this season for where UCF is and how good they can be. I think if of either of those two games, which one's more winnable? I would say Maryland. They nearly knocked off Maryland last year at home, if not for the abundance of turnovers that Mackenzie Milton had, late in that game. I mean, they still had an opportunity to beat them late in that game. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's the more winnable game here, But either way, I think UCF has an opportunity to win one, if not both of these games. If they lose both, still not the end of the road here. I mean, after 6 wins last year, I'm thinking 8 wins. I think there's an opportunity for 4 games to really be the toughest part of their schedule next year. I think you look at Georgia Tech, Maryland. Don't discount Memphis. They're going to be better. I think Navy's a tough draw for them. And then USF at the end of the year. So, I think they can handle most of the other teams in their conference. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people this year. Look, this could easily be, a 9-win season for UCF. It could also easily be another 6-win season for UCF with how good the American Conference is. So, I think both games, Georgia Tech, Maryland, are winnable. But if I had to pick one that I would put more money on for them to win, it would be at Maryland on September 23rd.
You mentioned the season maybe being between 6 and 9 wins. What do you think is a fair expectation for UCF in 2017?
I think 7-8 wins. I don't think anybody expected last year for this team to go from, winless to 6 wins. I mean, what a fantastic job Frost did in his inaugural season. There were ups and downs. They won a lot of close games. They lost a lot of close games. I think that's going to be the case again this year. I mean, you come out of the gate against FIU, a team that they struggled against last, in that winless season. They lost that first game against FIU. I think they're a good ball club, and they're going to play better under Butch Davis than they did under Ron Turner. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say 7 to 8 wins. Like I told you, Colton. I see this team is improving. They're going to get better offensively. Their defense is still something that's in question with all those secondary starters gone. One of my other bold predictions for the year was that they're going to upset USF in the final game of the season. Many people believe USF is going to cruise their way to a New Year's Six bowl, and they very well might. Their schedule is a cakewalk. The only Power 5 school they play is Illinois, a Lovie Smith Illinois team that won 2 games last year. But I think they're going to be, looking at UCF and saying, okay, we beat these guys easily last year. We can do it again. I think that's going to be a surprise game, a trap game for USF, especially if, UCF, is struggling at all this year. Heading into that game. So I would say realistically, a 1 or 2 win improvement from last year. If this team wins 10 or more games, I'd be extremely surprised. But you never know, man. I mean, they made major strides last year, and they're certainly not going to be sleeping. Teams aren't going to be sleeping on them in 2017. That's for sure.
For as much excitement as there is around the program this year, do you think that no matter what happens this year, especially if, like you're saying, they're able to have 8 or 9 wins, this team is still really young. Do you think that 2018 is where we'll really start to see this program under Scott Frost kind of be what a lot of people think it can be?
Yeah, I think so. I think 2018 is that year that you're looking at. Look, there's so many young pieces, and when you look at, college football coaches and their programs and their tenures, I think you can really start to judge them after year 3 and year 4. That's when, all their recruiting classes come in the guys that they, bring into this program. They start to implement their offense. Players get comfortable with coaches. I think that's where you really start to see whether or not a program is taking that next step. And I think 2018, look, if Milton, continues to improve and you've got this young crop of running backs, talent back there, wide receiver, they're starting to bring in some other guys as well that are talented. Right now there's this pipeline that Frost and his coaching staff, Ryan Held and Troy Walters and Sean Beckton have kind of built towards the Tampa Bay area, which is funny because Willie Taggart had kind of built this fence around it. And now, Frost is kind of over there infiltrating Tampa Bay, for this 2018 class. They got a lot of guys from the Bay Area that are currently committed. We'll see, of course, down the road come February if all those guys are going to be signing with UCF. But I think, with what Frost has been able to do on the recruiting trail, how UCF has really, under Zach Duval, developed in the weight room. This program is only going to continue to climb. And I think you're right, Colton. I think 2018 will really start to see, whether or not this program is ready to take that next step and be a true legitimate threat to schools in the Power 5. And I think, their schedule is only getting tougher as the years go on. And I think that's where, you look at UCF and say, can they take the next step? And I think 2018 certainly could be that year.
The future is very bright at UCF, but the present is also just as bright. And if you want to follow anything going on with UCF athletics, be sure to check out Ryan Bass's work at CBS Tampa and give him a follow on Twitter at @RY_Bass. Ryan, thanks for joining the show and talking UCF football, man. I'm fired up now.
Colton, man, you did a phenomenal job. Great questions, buddy. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. And, anything you ever need from me, don't hesitate, bud. I'm more than happy to come on and let's see what UCF has in store for 2017, man. Going to be exciting.
Hey, next time I'm in Orlando, I'm going to call you up. I need to, because I was just walking around the field by myself and like people were looking at me like, is this guy trying to break in? And I was like, yeah, I kind of want to see the field. So next time I'm out there, I'll call you and we'll throw the football on the field or something.
Hey, I've been around that campus a time or two, buddy. I'll be your official tour guide. You got it.
Thank you, Ryan.
See you, Colton.
I'll tell you one thing. I'm going to be pissed if the next time I go out to Orlando and the Dante Culpepper statue isn't there. So, petition to anybody, any UCF donors listening, let's make that happen. Big thanks once again to Ryan Bass for joining the show and talking UCF football. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at Ry_Bass. Also, be sure to throw me a line on Twitter at Dubsco, DUBSCO, and let me know what you thought about this episode and future episodes of the Two Stripes podcast. If you have any ideas on who I should talk about, please feel free to let me know and go to soundcloud.com/TwoStripesPod or search the Two Stripes podcast on Apple Podcast and subscribe to all of the episodes and any new ones that I drop there. The podcast will be back next week, sticking in the American Athletic Conference and talking Cincinnati Bearcats. Luke Fickell is a guy that I know a lot about, being an Ohio State fan, but I'm going to talk with SB Nation's Down the Drive about his first year at Cincinnati and where they see the program going under his direction and how his first year will go there. I want to thank you, the listener, for tuning into the show today. It is much appreciated, and I will talk to you next week. My name is Colton Denning, and this is the Two Stripes Podcast.